Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the first Labour budget in 14 years. Employers will have to pay more national insurance, the minimum wage is going up and fuel duty is frozen. The Chancellor says she needs to raise £40 billion. We'll have reaction and analysis of today's budget and what it means for you.
We need to find money from somewhere. So does that mean that we can't take on extra staff? Does the workload then come to us? Or does that impact our customers, which we really don't want it to?
Waiting a bit longer now to put my heating on at night rather than put it on right away. But I suppose the colder, although they say it's mild outside, it's quite chilly inside if you're sitting.
Also on tonight's programme, Scottish judges make a historic decision that could see more rape cases go to court.
And coming up in the sport, it's a packed night of Premiership football with a highly anticipated clash at Pittodrie between high-flying Aberdeen and Rangers.
Hello, I'm Laura Miller. Welcome to Wednesday's programme. It was billed as a big budget and it lived up to that. Labour's first in more than 14 years with a lot in it and some very big numbers. One of the biggest from the Chancellor today, this one. £40 billion, that's the total tax rises being implemented by Rachel Reeves, the highest since the early 1990s. The Chancellor says it's to fill a massive black hole in the country's finances left by the last government. Where is that going to come from then? Well, a big chunk through an increase in national insurance contributions from employers. For employees, though, the minimum wage will go up to £12.21 per hour from April. Among the other announcements, fuel duty was frozen, private school fees will no longer be exempt from VAT, and an increase in the so-called windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas producers. We'll look at what this all means for the economy and for your finances in just a moment. But first, here's our Westminster correspondent, David Porter.
After weeks of frenetic activity, leaks and briefings, a clear direction of political travel is emerging. Taxes and spending are going up.
I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Labour's first budget in 14 years and the first one ever delivered by a female Chancellor. Rachel Reeves clear her hand had been forced by what she'd inherited from the Conservatives.
Their failure to assess the scale of the challenges facing our public services means that this budget raises taxes by £40 billion. Any Chancellor standing here today would have to face this reality.
Much of the tax rises will come from higher employer national insurance contributions. But VAT and employees' national insurance will remain the same. Income tax is decided by the Scottish Government. Fuel duty will be frozen, but some alcohol duties will go up, much to the anger of whisky producers.
And I commend this statement to the House.
In response, the previous Prime Minister, a former Chancellor himself, was scornful.
Energy taxes up, business rates up, first-time buyer stamp duty up, pensions tax up. They have fiddled the figures.
The Scottish Secretary insists overall it's a good settlement for Scotland.
Well, £1.5 billion in year this year, extra for Scotland, and £3.4 billion next year, the highest settlement in the devolution era for Scotland. A great boost to Scottish public services, a great boost to infrastructure, a boost to growth, pay rises for hundreds of thousands of Scots. It's a great budget for Scotland, and there's now no hiding place for the SNP.
From ministers in Edinburgh, a more guarded response.
This is a step in the right direction, and we're really pleased that they've listened to us about the need to invest in public services. But a one-year budget does not address 14 years of austerity. We need to see that continued investment over a longer period of time to repair the damage created by that austerity.
It sounds like one thing on the day, and then once you examine it fully and drill down into the figures, you see things that you weren't anticipating. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, I would say.
Tonight, MPs and the rest of us are digesting exactly what the Chancellor has had to say, how it will affect us in the days and weeks ahead. But we now know the Labour government's economic priorities. David Porter, reporting Scotland, Westminster.
Well, amidst the politics and the economics, what most of us really want to know is how the budget is going to hit our pockets. If you're a worker on the minimum wage, your earnings will go up. But how will the jobs market be affected by the increased financial burden on the employers? Likewise, if you're a pensioner, your state pension is due to go up in line with average earnings. But as we know, your automatic right to help with your heating bills is ending. So, how are people feeling about what they heard today? Our political correspondent David Wallace-Lockhart has been finding out.
While the Chancellor tries to mould the public finances into better shape, Rook and Glen Pottery in Glasgow are heading towards a busy period. But this Halloween, father and daughter-in-law owners Caroline and Stephen find changes to national insurance and the minimum wage a bit frightening.
If you want a big corporation, there's a department for this and department for that. In a small business, there isn't. It's you. So it tends to result in long hours. In terms of minimum wage, we don't earn minimum wage given the amount of hours that we do.
So we have a price structure that really includes everybody, and we want to be able to keep it that way. But with rising costs means we need to find money from somewhere. So does that mean that we can't take on extra staff? Does the workload then come to us? Or does that impact our customers, which we really don't want it to?
Labour said they didn't want to raise taxes on working people. Do you consider yourself working people?
Well,
what else are we?
I don't know what else we are if we're not working people. We know we work blinking
hard.
We're
hard-working people, yeah, hard-working. And if we're not working people, then what are we? We're at the coalface of it, really, aren't
Absolutely,
we?
the clay face.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that feel when that is said by Labour?
It's just an insulting thing.
The pottery business may be small enough to claim back national insurance rises, but they remain unimpressed.
4 and 5. 45.
Rather than watch the budget, the pensioners at the Daffodil Club in the East End of Glasgow are doing their own number crunching. It's bingo time. But they're still happy to give their views.
Increase in the state pension, good news?
Yes. Very good news. Very good news.
Well, it's gone down, and a penny off a pint as well in the pub.
Oh, what about spirits?
5-0.
Many here are on pension credit, so will still get their winter heating payment, but not Annie.
I'm waiting a bit longer now to put my heating on at night rather than put it on right away. But it's supposed to be colder. I mean, although they say it's mild outside, it's quite chilly inside if you're sitting doing nothing, so...
Better news for students at Aberdeen University. They welcomed the rise in the minimum wage.
I think it will make a big difference. I think it's a positive, change, and it needs to happen for us to just live a bit easier.
I think it'll be very beneficial to a lot of people. I think I've got a lot of friends that have part-time jobs, and money is something that worries them quite a lot.
The detailed analysis is now underway. Who's been hit hard by this budget? Who's been handed a bit of a break? David Wallace-Lockhart, reporting Scotland.
Well, this is a UK-wide budget, but it does dictate how much money is coming to Holyrood to spend in devolved areas. And today, the Chancellor said an extra £3.4 billion is coming the Scottish Government's way. Let's get the thoughts then of our business and economy editor, Douglas Fraser. Douglas, let's just deal with that figure first. Where does it come from?
Well, clearly a very big number. It's the sum that the Treasury is giving to the Scottish Government to distribute next financial year, a smaller figure for this current financial year. To put this in context, the total Scottish Government budget this year is over £50 billion. This is an increase of more than 6% on that, nearly £1 in 5 on capital spending, so that's housing, roads, schools and hospitals, and so on, and the rest on day-to-day running of public services to employ staff and so on. That's for the Scottish Government and the Parliament to allocate, with a draft budget to be set out 5 weeks from now. Quite a bit more than had been expected. This has been a surprising budget in how far Rachel Reeves has gone to borrow and to tax a lot more in order to spend a lot more as well. It's also a gamble that injecting such a large amount of money at this scale is going to sustain improved public services rather than go in the short term on inflating pay and construction costs.
Lots more still to pour over, but broadly speaking, how will this affect the Scottish economy and people here?
Well, the plan was to both to fix the public services and to boost growth in the economy. It's not doing so much of the latter, at least in the medium term. It's not impressive in terms of the figures, the forecasts that have come out of all of this today. There are measures to do some more for growth sectors, from aerospace to bioscience and renewable energy. But most employers are looking at the increase in minimum wage that they have to pay, which pushes up earnings also for those on the next rungs up the earnings ladder. And there's this very big increase in employers' payroll tax, their contribution to national insurance. From the Scottish Tourism Alliance, and we're hearing it from a lot of sectors, I'm hearing businesses will squeeze pay next year in order to absorb this extra cost, and there may also be redundancies. The other sectors particularly affected in Scotland include oil and gas, with their trade bodies saying that the tax increase on them is makes a difficult day for them. Investment is set to fall by more than a quarter as a result of today's announcements. And farming is hard hit as well by a further squeeze on subsidies and on a change to the tax paid when a farm is passed from one generation to the next, a time-honoured tradition. Now, that could really disrupt agriculture and the rural economy.
I'm sure lots of people still picking through the details tonight, but thank you very much for your thoughts, Douglas.
Thanks.
OK, well, let's speak now to our political editor, Glenn Campbell, who's at Westminster for us tonight. Glenn, a big day there. We've heard about some of the economics of this, but what is the political impact of this budget?
Well, just think back to the general election campaign. One of the SNP's core attack lines was that a Labour government would continue austerity. They're not repeating that line today. In fact, they're trying to claim some credit for what, as you heard, the Scottish Finance Secretary describes as a step in the right direction budget. I think there have been quite good communications behind the scenes between the Treasury and the Scottish Government in advance, so that the amount of extra spending the Scottish Government has, both this year and next, is broadly in line with what they expected. In fact, when it comes to capital spending, the money for building projects in the public good, I think the Scottish Government is pleasantly surprised about the amount of money that's coming for that. Where does this leave the politics? Well, it's not to say that there aren't any complaints from the SNP and Scottish ministers. They would have liked the UK government to end the two-child cap on benefits, for instance, and they've become quite focused on the extent to which the UK government will come up with further additional cash to offset the impact of that rise in employers' national insurance contributions, the impact that will have on the public services in Scotland. As I understand it, there will be extra cash, but it may take some time for that to be negotiated, and it may not be the case that the Scottish Government knows how much money it's getting by the time it sets its budget at the beginning of December. I think Labour will be pleased today that they have blunted that core SNP attack of continued austerity, and that gives them some political space as we look ahead to the next Holyrood elections to try and turn the focus on improving the delivery of public services like the NHS and education in Scotland. And of course, that is an area, these are areas where there is plenty of scope for improvement.
OK, Glenn Campbell, our political editor at Westminster, thank you. Well, there is extensive coverage of the budget and unpacking all of what it means for you across the BBC. You can find lots more analysis and information on the BBC Scotland News website and on the BBC News app. Now to some of the day's other stories, and a man felt forced to jump to his death from a 12th storey flat in Aberdeen to escape a man who'd spent 2 days torturing him, a court has heard. 37-year-old Lee Smith abducted Jamie Forbes, also 37, and held him against his will at his flat in Elphinstone Court in January. Smith repeatedly struck his victim with a hammer and punched and kicked him before Mr Forbes made the jump that ended his life. Smith admitted culpable homicide at the High Court in Edinburgh, and he'll be sentenced next month. Police Scotland's officers will withdraw goodwill from 5 p.m. this Friday in what is effectively a work to rule. The move comes after talks on pay failed to reach agreement. It'll include police officers working the hours rostered but not turning up early or staying later unless overtime is paid and not taking equipment home. The Scottish Police Federation says it's to demonstrate how much discretionary effort and free policing hours are ordinarily taken for granted. Now to a real change that experts have described as historic for Scotland's legal system, which could pave the way for more rape cases to go to court. Following a request from Scotland's top law officer, a group of judges have overturned an 87-year-old rule which limits what can be done with statements from alleged victims. Our Home Affairs correspondent David Cowan reports.
What? Decades ago, the ruling at the centre of this case was made by 7 judges, so earlier this year, 9 had to come together to decide whether it should stand or fall. Scots law requires corroboration, evidence from at least 2 sources to prove each of the essential facts of the case. Rape convictions require corroborated evidence that the accused was responsible, that there was no consent, and that the physical act of rape had taken place. In the 1930s, judges placed limits on what could be done with a statement made by an alleged victim immediately after an alleged crime. The Lord Advocate Dorothy Bain argued the law had taken a wrong turn. The ruling meant that those statements could only be used to show that the person involved had always been consistent in their account of what had happened, that they'd always said the same thing. The Lord Advocate asked for the rule to be overturned. She said those statements should be able to corroborate other evidence to prove that the crime had taken place and the accused was the perpetrator. One of the judges only agreed with part of her argument, but the other 8 said the rule should be changed. It will mean more cases will reach court. Campaigners have called it a landmark decision.
It's very difficult because of the nature of rape cases to fit the rules of corroboration. What this decision means is that there's a reduction in barriers to cases getting to court.
Time will tell whether the change will result in more convictions, but some defence lawyers believe that combined with the abolition of not proven, there will be an increased risk of miscarriages of justice.
My worry is that the balance point is shifted so that inevitably there will be innocent people who end up in the jail. That's an increasing risk as we move in this direction.
This is the second time the Lord Advocate has won changes to the rules on evidence. Today, she said, this decision continues the evolution we are seeing in Scotland towards development of a progressive and humane justice system that truly serves our society. She believes there's the potential to transform the way the Crown prosecutes all offences. Her critics fear she's going too far. David Cowan reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Scotland's party leaders have been remembering the former First Minister Alex Salmond during a motion of condolence at Holyrood. It follows a private family funeral in Aberdeenshire yesterday. The Scottish Parliament paid tribute to the man who led the SNP government for 7 years, recognising his contribution to public life.
He was creative in the arguments he put forward. He was driven to make the case for Scottish independence. He was fierce in his analysis of political rivals and determined to challenge their positions.
I recall Alec on several occasions trying to convince my father that I should ditch the Labour Party and join the SNP instead. Now, he didn't succeed in that, but I think it demonstrates Alec's bold confidence that allowed him to confound the odds time and time again.
He could dismantle an argument with a single quip or rally a movement with a stirring call to arms. His oratory skills leaving both colleagues and adversaries in his shadow.
And there is a special programme on the life and legacy of the former First Minister. Alex Salmond, the man who changed Scotland, is on straight after us on BBC One Scotland, and it will also be available on iPlayer. Now, the brother of a Scottish Sikh man who's been detained in India for 7 years says he's had a positive and constructive meeting with the UK Foreign Secretary. Jagtar Singh Johal from Dumbarton faces terror charges in connection with political violence in the north of India, but he's never been convicted. The Indian authorities say due process is being followed. His brother, Gurpreet Singh Johal, who's a Labour councillor, met the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, in London this morning.
It came across really positive because it wasn't about just bringing Jagtar back home. It's constructively saying, how do we bring him back home and which engaged David Lammy. He understood where we were coming from. Now, proof is in the pudding. We'll see how that comes to light, and we need Jack to back home. That's what we require at the end of the day.
Now, take a look at this. It is an ancient tree in Lochaber known as the Skipponish Oak, and it has just been named UK Tree of the Year. It's thought to be at least 400 years old and is named after the band Skipponish, who brought it to the attention of conservationists in 2009. It's hidden in a non-native Sitka spruce plantation on Achnacarry Estate. The award was unveiled on last night's One Show, where Jill Donaghy from the Woodland Trust spoke about what makes it so special.
It's like a cathedral for nature, I guess we might say. For me, the most amazing thing about this tree is that there's so much life on it. So there's about 2,300 species that actually live on an ancient oak tree. This particular tree is anything from 400 to 1,000 years old.
Wow.
So if we think there's been 2 world wars when all the timber was felled, the tree survived that. More recently, commercial forestry, so we're in a forestry plantation right now, the tree survived that. So it is a survivor.
Lovely. OK, let's get tonight's sport now with Lewis. Lots of football tonight.
Plenty on the go. Thanks, Laura. Yes, hello there. Well, what a night of Premiership football we have in store. Let's start with this one. The highly anticipated meeting of the second and third place sides, Aberdeen and Rangers. Tyrone Smith is at Pittodrie for us.
The word blockbuster gets bandied around in Scottish football, but tonight's Aberdeen Rangers Pittodrie encounter truly deserves such a billing, not just because of the well-documented historic rivalry between the two sides, but because this is a really high-stakes affair. Aberdeen's stunning start to the season has raised the prospect that the Dons could challenge Celtic and Rangers Premiership domination. The season might still be in its relatively early stages, but Jimmy Tillene's team, they're unbeaten in their 15 games across all competitions, and they're level on points with leaders Celtic, and if they win tonight they would go 9 points clear of Rangers.
The excitement around the game, like with supporters and fans and all these kind of things, is just exciting. So it's not a negative thing, but the players, I think they're focused on the performance and try to be as best as possible for Aberdeen and Aberdeen Football Club.
Well, Aberdeen's form has been lauded. That of Rangers has been somewhat start-stop. In fact, they've only won 1 of their 4 league games on the road this term.
It's about us taking the points. We need to take the points. We need to focus on that. So we're now, after this game, still in 1/4 of the season or something. So it's last season we came back, we were in front, and at the end you don't get a title. So it's about us taking the points.
So when you put that all together, you really do start to see why this is such a huge game for both sides. The action starts at 8 o'clock. Tyrone Smith reporting Scotland, Pittodrie.
And there are 5 other fixtures tonight. You can see all the highlights on Sports Scene later at 10:45. One at Celtic Park, where the leaders host Dundee. It's 4th versus 5th as Dundee United take on Motherwell. While in Paisley, it's the Battle of the Saints. Ross County take on bottom side Hibs, while their neighbours Hearts are at home to Kilmarnock.
I want time on the training pitch to improve the players, improve our way of playing, and with the game schedule we've got at the moment, we're learning on the job a little bit. But I have to say the players have done that extremely well so far.
Scotland's women are closing in on their first appearance at a major championship since 2019 after an impressive 5-0 aggregate victory over Hungary. They'll now play Finland in the final playoff round for a place at next year's Euros in Switzerland. Here's Sheila McLaren.
We managed to express themselves today on the pitch and probably one of our best levels, and we have a team there. I think not only the players who started, but all the players who are coming from the bench with clear ideas, so I'm very happy for their confidence too.
That's what we've been working towards, and yeah, I feel like the team is ready. You know, we've been through a playoff process before. We know how difficult it can be. We know how tough it is, and obviously that disappointment from a couple of years ago. But these moments, you know, they do make you more resilient.
Big result there. And
absolutely great. Okay, thank you, Lewis.
Cheers.
Now, elsewhere tonight, former Neighbours star Jason Donovan has been speaking to The Seven about his role in the Rocky Horror Picture Show and his upcoming tour.
I've never performed at the Pavilion, and it's a wonderful sort of venue, and I'm very excited about the audiences. It's Halloween, so it can't really go wrong, can we?
It's the week to be here, Jason.
It is the week to be here.
Yeah, be sure to tune into that. You can see the full interview on the 7 on the BBC Scotland channel shortly. And now Judith is here with the weather. More beautiful autumn pictures.
Do you know, you cannot beat the autumnal colours, can you? They're always so, I don't know, they're ephemeral, I should say. Thank you very much. Very good evening to you. And the sky blanketed, beautiful hues there behind me. Now, I'll take a wee look at the pressure chart to see how things are going to be over the next few days. It's this high pressure. It's staying with us. It's getting more and more expansive. Yes, we'll see a few weather fronts just sinking south, bringing a bit of cloud and rain at times. But that high really establishes itself over the weekend and stays with us next week. Now, why is that? It's all tied in with the jet stream. Now, usually we see low pressure systems forming on the jet stream, that fast moving river of winds way up in the atmosphere, and it usually fires towards us at this time of year, but it's stuck across to the north of us. Now, this is a setup we usually see in summer, so all the pressure systems are up across Iceland and Greenland. So for us, it means a lot of dry weather, thicker cloud in the west with the odd spot of rain later in the night, clear skies in the east, and we'll see rain moving into the Northern Isles later, particularly Shetland, but it will be persistent and it will be windy across the north as well. Tomorrow morning there'll be some early sunshine in the east, but cloudier skies in the west, and that rain still across Shetland, and it will stay there all day. Across the Northern Isles, winds will strengthen. There'll be gale force at times with outbreaks of rain persistent over Shetland, just edging into Orkney. Eastern Scotland seeing the lion's share of any sunshine tomorrow. We should see some brighter sunny spells, 16, maybe 17 Celsius in the sunshine, and across down towards eastern borders and East Lothian, but always hanging on to more cloud in the west, and in that southwesterly wind, which will be strong at times, driving some moisture into the upslopes of western Scotland at times. So windy, but still mild though, 14 Celsius. Now, very little changes as we head to the latter part of the afternoon, and if you're thinking of heading out guising tomorrow night, well, actually, for most of us, it's going to be dry, it's going to be cloudy, it'll be mild, and it will be breezy, but we'll hang on to that rain and those strong winds across the very far north. Now, as we head into Friday, we'll see a weak weather front sinking south. It eventually becomes confined to the south, some bits and pieces of rain. Brightening up from the north, though, with some sunshine, but turning noticeably cooler or colder with lighter winds. That's your forecast.
Thank you, Judith. And that is Reporting Scotland. Anne McAlpine will have your late news at 10:30 tonight. Until then, from everyone in the team, good night.